Fire Emblem Path of Radiance is a masterpiece and one of the most complete video game packages I've ever played. After revisiting this title and its successor over the last 2 weeks, I was genuinely shocked at how well the complete package had aged. Its themes, characterizations, and world building are all top notch and some of the best I've encountered in any fantasy-based game. So what I'm trying to say is that Path of Radiance is a bit like Salma Hayek. You know, when you first lay eyes back on his beauty back in the day, you're like, damn, this is actually the pinnacle. Then fast forward almost 20 years and she's still fine as wine. Yeah, that's exactly how I felt about revisiting my journey in Tellius. So come take a ride with me while we discuss what I believe makes Fire Emblem Path of Radiance an absolute masterpiece. My first encounter with this title and the heroes of Tellius was when it first launched back in 2005 during my high school days. Being a fanatic when it came to Super Smash Bros. Melee, and more specifically an absolute scumbag who loved to crush my friend group with both Marth and Roy, so naturally when I heard that another title from the series would be making its way to home consoles, my interest was immediately piqued. I don't think it can be overstated just how much influence both heroes' entry into the Smash series helped encourage otherwise unaware players to dip their toes into the world of Fire Emblem. In short, it was their inclusion into Melee that sparked the curiosity in many of us, and it was the ultimate gateway drug into one of the best strategy RPG series of all times. Hats off to you, young Sakurai. You see, at the time of this game's release, the Fire Emblem series had been relegated to strictly GBA releases for its last 3 titles, and the last actual home console release being Theresia 776, a Japanese-only release back on the Famicom days in 1999. So needless to say, this foray into the 3D sphere had more than a bit riding on it for its success regarding the future of the Fire Emblem series. Now, even within my first playthrough of Path of Radiance, I could tell this one was special. As we'll dive into in each section that we break down, this title carries with it a lot of qualities that were a perfect introduction into the Fire Emblem franchise and strategy games in general. As a disclaimer, at the time of my first playthrough, I had a bit of a background for both JRPG and RPG mainstays from previous generations, including Final Fantasy titles and of course the legendary Final Fantasy Tactics. So I wouldn't say at this point I was anything close to being an expert. I knew my way around a grid map, if you know what I'm saying. So as per usual, we'll break this down into 4 different sections, including story, gameplay, art style and music, and the overall legacy. And we'll wrap everything up in a nice bow discussing its overall impact and what sets it apart from other strategy RPG games. As usual, if you are a fan of Fire Emblem or RPG based games, make sure you subscribe for upcoming content and drop a comment letting me know your thoughts on Path of Radiance. Alright, let's get started. Okay, so let's start off with what is the strongest aspect of this title, its story. Now, it's well known that this title is actually one half of a duo. However, from beginning to end, this game unfolds in a complete manner that doesn't leave many lingering questions in the player's mind or any critical plot threads running amok. It does sow a few elements of intrigue that are further explored in the sequel, but if a player chooses to never pick up the companion piece of Radiant Dawn, this experience wouldn't be lessened in any way. This, the 9th installment within the franchise, takes place on the continent of Tellius, a diverse and vast landscape populated from everything from man, beast, and the almighty man-beast? There's an obvious furry joke in there, but today, boys, we'll raise our maturity level up just 1 notch. The 2 general species that inhabit Tellius are humans, also referred to as Bjork in this title, and man-beast hybrids referred to as Lagoos. Our view into this world is helmed by young Ike, son of Grill, leader of the Grill mercenaries. Without giving away too much of the plot, your home country of Crimea is swept up into war by the invading Dayan forces, and we are soon tasked with helping the princess reclaim her throne. As expected of a plot this sprawling, there are a vast number of undercurrent plots that help build out both the world and its inhabitants alike, and I gotta say this is handled quite well. Even on my most recent playthrough, it struck me how narratively tight this game's pacing is, and there may be only 1 or 2 filler chapters that felt like they were added just to fill out additional gameplay time, or possibly attempt to showcase other perspectives from the inhabiting residents. Now, the most obvious comparison plot and narrative wise to this game would of course be Daenerys of Game of Thrones, but you know what, I'm kind of sick of using that comparison. For a more one-to-one comparison, I think Final Fantasy XII more accurately fits the bill. Princess Alencia of Crimea, not unlike Princess Ash of Damascus, meets a team of somewhat ragtag individuals that, while having their own hopes and ambitions, ultimately come to understand and support each other and support the restoration of their homeland. The structure of the plot allows our crew to traverse every corner of Tellius, which allows the player to get a real feel for the scope and depth in this new world and its inhabitants. As just the case with our own world, while traveling, Ike is introduced to a variety of different cultures, social classes, and xenophobic structures that exist within the lands of Lagoos and Bjork alike, and while on the surface much of this world does seem a bit picture perfect, their narrative does a great job of showcasing the internal rot of many of these nations, and how a history of intolerance towards each race is slowly unraveling the continent at its seams and can possibly give birth to an unimaginable calamity. Now, when it comes to characters, Ike, our bright-eyed blue-haired protagonist, is actually a bit of an earnest everyman at the beginning of the game. However, his evolution over this title is masterfully done and is one of the main reasons I find myself often revisiting this game repeatedly. Initially presented to us as a young teenager struggling for his father's recognition, and like many of us, his father is the bar that he must strive to surpass in life. And you know what? I absolutely felt that. Having originally played this game when I was a bright-eyed youth, and now being a father of a preteen, it's allowed me to appreciate both dynamics of both him and his father on a deeper scale. Now, while Ike is pretty good and with absolutely no disrespect intended, believe me when I say that the supporting cast absolutely steals the show at almost all times. Ike being the relatively young and naive POV that we have into this world, the title's writing team is careful to showcase that friends and foes that we meet along our journey are fully realized with their own worldview, motivations, and personal stakes on the line. And on this front, a few key standouts is our resident stratagem of the Grail Mercenaries and my personal favorite in the entire game, Soren, as well as the Hawk and Raven Kings to Barn and Nasala respectively. The writing is absolutely superb, giving primary and supporting characters a true sense of personality and gravitas. And character work aside and plot points aside, I think what's truly this game's X factor and what sets it apart from other traditional RPG stories is its sincere focus on the continued development of both its world and main protagonists. From the first chapter until the credits close, games writers are sure to keep the game's central themes of political and societal corruption and intolerance front and center. Each chapter dives deeper into this layer cake, whilst doing an exceptional job of showcasing multiple perspectives regarding the central conflict at hand. It does a masterful job of showcasing just how insidious the ones in power can truly be, and how bigotry can be veiled under the guises of tradition and maintenance of the status quo. In short, this game is keen to not paint the world or its denizens in a black and white palette, but rather showcases the many shades of gray that exist in people from everything from morality to familial ties, and leans into the diversity of the world of Tellius. Overall score, 10 out of 10. Masterful. Okay, so I've exhausted all I can say without spoilers, so jump ahead to this timestamp to avoid any spoilers for the story. Okay, so one thing you probably noticed I didn't mention at all was the central conflict for our hero Ike and who his antagonist was. We all know that most stories are only as good as the antagonistic forces that drives it, and while Mad King Ashnard is certainly the catalyst for the majority of the game's events, the true focus of our protagonist is the Big Black Knight. When Sir Grill is murdered by said knight at the beginning of the game, it's the start of our hero's arc to become strong enough to overcome the foe who bested his father. Seeing Ike's evolution throughout the game's roughly 30-hour playtime is perhaps the most satisfying part of the entire narrative. Going from a mercenary who hadn't even pulled a single job to the leader of the Crimean Liberation Front, this is expertly handled throughout the game's runtime, and by the time we arrive at the fated rematch, we can feel our hero's growth and that he has attained enough skill to defeat the man who bested his father in combat. Now as for King Ashnard, I think this maniacal worldview works quite well for the plot, and it reminded me a bit of Apocalypse from the X-Men franchise, very Darwin-esque, the strongest will survive mentality in which he sees all things, whether it be man, beast, or entire kingdoms, as nothing more than tools or obstacles to complete his true goal of awakening the Dark God from the Fire Emblem. And despite this being a Nintendo title, some of the themes are actually a bit more hardcore than one might be expecting. Slavery, murder, genocide, genetic experimentation, and more is all on the table. And I for one am glad that they took this creative risk and leaned into some of the more unscrupulous natures of man when it came to the entirety of the story. Now moving on, we have the gameplay aspect of Path to Radiance. With this title falling into the strategy RPG genre, it's first and foremost meant to be a tactical based experience. This game I will say is slightly easier in most scenarios than some of the other titles in the series, and even some other strategy games in general. I would say it's a perfect introductory title to the genre with a relatively forgiving learning curve and a balanced roster with some extremely abusable units. So for the uninitiated, gameplay of Fire Emblem goes a bit like this. Each unit has the ability to traverse the map and attack foes to satisfy victory conditions. And a quick side note, I actually really appreciated the variety in victory conditions, allowing for some versatility in playstyles, as well as requiring improved tactics from the players throughout the battle. This is a welcome change from the customary just slaughter everyone on the map or protect this one person on the map. I think in particular, some of the maps where you have to defend or withstand an onslaught of enemies with reinforcements are very well done and require proper care of character positioning and resource management. And moving on to the thing that makes this a proper Fire Emblem game, the Holy Weapon Trinity. Spears beat swords, swords beat axes, and axes beat spears. This is the foundation of the combat engine in the series and can easily be the differentiator between slaying a foe or being slain. The additional layer of strategy helps encourage players to have their thinking cap on at all times and be aware of the map and enemy movements. Moving on for combat, there's an additional layer of depth added by way of your home base where you can adjust your character skills and give active or passive buffs throughout battle. Some of them are pretty busted and make it so you can actually clear a map with one character like game, looking at you three.
Why is it when something happens, it is always you three?
Also, the support system has been enhanced a bit, providing characters with a passive battle bonus throughout encounters, as well as additional dialogue options when at the home base. It's actually worth it to take the time to invest in some of these pairings, as it can definitely give you the edge you need on the battlefield. Now, this game doesn't have any random enemy encounters or any place you can go and grind, so that means that the experience that you can accrue throughout your playthrough is finite. So in lieu of this, they give you access to bonus experience in order to award your units. The amount rewarded to you post-battle is dependent on your performance, so this further incentivizes you to play as methodically as possible. One thing when it comes to this game is never rest on your laurels. Even when you think you got a good thing going, always expect the unexpected to happen, as showcased by our friend Boyd here. Alright, this guy's trying to attack me with a spear. Have you not seen the triangle, son? I win those, alright? You're dead, let's go. Next, another dude with a spear. Come on, man. I win those. Oh, you got a little hit off, that's fine. 1, 2, you're out of there. Let's go. Big B's for Big Boyd in the house, baby. Let's go. Level up. Y'all ain't fucking with me. Let's go. Now, if I could just get this next guy to just hit me and leave me, we'll be good. We could take this. All right, he gets a hit. Oh, we got a critical. Fuck that. We ain't playing safe. Let's go. Boyd in the house. Now, this next guy, if he just hit me, we good. We good. Oh, we got we got the critical, but we got the 2 HP left. This could be a little spicy, bro. Oh, no, this guy got a... Oh, rip. My guy had just a little bit too much dip on his chip right there. Now, I played this game on an emulator upscaled to 4K, and I gotta say for the most part, it looks pretty damn good for a title pushing 20 years, and although some of the battle animations look downright janky, like seriously Ike, what is this stance, my guy? Now, while the attack animations don't hold a candle to its 2D predecessors that came before it, they do a satisfactory job when tied with the excellent sound design. I will say that one of my minor gripes in this game is that the battle animations take entirely too long at times, and even when you turn them to map only, it does sometimes take ages to get through certain maps. If this game and its successor are ever remastered by Nintendo, I sincerely hope that they address this. Also, I'm kind of 50-50 on the entire aspect of permadeath. You see, when you lose a character, they're gone, man, never to return. So for someone like me that's always gunning for a deathless run, this can mean an awful lot of this. I can appreciate that this makes each decision that you make weigh so much more, and it's somewhat offset by the convenient battle save option that they have, which gives you the ultimate do-over unless you did it at a poor time and soft lock yourself. Overall, I found the combat to be completely serviceable, if not a touch vanilla. It does an excellent job with modernizing the Fire Emblem formula and bringing it to the newer hardware generation that was the GameCube at the time, but I would likely be hard pressed to find anyone that says that they boot this game up just for the combat mechanics. 8 out of 10. I absolutely love this game's art style. I think in tandem with its excellent musical score, which we'll get into in a bit, this is one of the primary reasons that Path of Radiance has a very timeless feel to it. The simple yet elegant character designs for each cast member ties perfectly with the writing, giving the roster a perfect blend of distinct and memorable characterization throughout. This is thanks to the efforts of Senrai Kita, who had previously done some freelance work over on SNK, but had been working with Nintendo on and off since Sacred Stones. Despite each cast member only having a handful of actual art pieces, they're vibrant enough to be easy on the eye and never felt bland throughout my numerous playthroughs of this game. And moving on to the music of Path of Radiance, it's all aces. Every song on this OST from top to bottom is immaculate for the world of Tellius. You see, while most soundtracks can be considered the icing on the cake for any good RPG title, in the case of Path of Radiance, I feel it's an absolute integral part of the entire equation. Due to the ambitious nature of this title story, which encompasses the majority of all human emotions on the spectrum, from grief, anger, joy, and triumph, these compositions do a fair amount of heavy lifting in keeping the player fully immersed in the story at all times, and rightfully engaged during some of the longer battles. Seriously, in-game, some of the maps can easily take 40 minutes to an hour to clear, so you'll be hearing some of these themes quite a bit. The sweeping orchestration of punchy trumpets, beautiful piano ballads, and exquisite strings help you feel like an actual hero when you triumph over a stage or encountering boss battles. In particular, the Black Knight's theme is one of the most menacing I've ever heard in any RPG. 10 out of 10, masterclass performance. So let's discuss the legacy of Path of Radiance and what it means to a lot of people and many fans of the series. In very much the same way that Ike and Roy's inclusion to the Smash Bros. Franchise helped reinvigorate the Fire Emblem fanbase and definitely helped get the wheels spinning for Path of Radiance, I feel that Path of Radiance very much took the torch from its humble 2D beginnings, kept the fire burning for legacy Fire Emblem players, as well as welcoming new players to the fold. I think it's safe to say that if this game wasn't as well received critically as it was, it's very easy to envision a Fire Emblem free future, robbing us of some of the greatest 3DS titles and one of the greatest Switch titles of all time. One major thing that this title did was show that the series was up to the task of creating a compelling and multi-layered narrative that would connect with modern audiences. Not to say that previous iterations of the series also didn't have these things, but to many players at this time in 2005, many of those titles were locked behind hardware that wasn't easily accessible or the Game Boy. So outside of Smash Bros., a lot of us really didn't have a point of reference when it came to the Fire Emblem series. Nintendo did take a pretty big leap of faith releasing this game onto a home console, and was likely the primary catalyst as to why the series still exists today. So in the end, the culmination of all these elements make Fire Emblem Path of Radiance a masterpiece in my book, and easily one of my favorite games of all time. Check us out next time while we continue our journey through the Tellius series by discussing who are the strongest characters in Path of Radiance. If you enjoyed this retrospective, let me know what you thought down in the comments, and subscribe for future Fire Emblem content where we'll be tackling Radiant Dawn. LC signing out, peace.